Anxiety is one of the most common mental health conditions in the world today. It affects, by some estimates, up to 40% of young people. And it's not limited to age group. Anxiety can affect elderly, adults, children, even very young children, even preschool children. And it can be hard to recognize. But the tricky thing about anxiety is that when it's present, anxiety can be adaptive in the sense that anxiety signals oftentimes an appropriate awareness of risk and can propel us to take action that will preserve our lives. A good example would be watching a child about to step into the path of a moving vehicle or becoming aware of the presence of a dangerous predator that could injure or kill a person. So anxiety can be adaptive, but when it becomes problematic is when it's excessive, essentially when it exceeds what is appropriate for the situation, when the intensity of the anxiety overwhelms the person's ability to function. That is, because that individual is so anxious, they are basically made incapable of functioning at the expected level for their age and level of development. And in those states, we term anxiety that is excessive, that is impacting the person's ability to live, to enjoy their lives, and to function at their stage of development. We call those anxiety disorders. There are many kinds of anxiety disorders. The commoner ones are generalized anxiety disorder, which is sort of a free floating anxiety that's present there all the time in the background. And I'll talk about the symptoms in a minute. There are other common types. There's social anxiety, which is also very common and actually increasingly more common among young people. In particular, you see this trend among young folks who have, particularly the generation that grew up through the COVID pandemic, and really lost an opportunity to learn to socialize and interact with other people in person normally. So you see a lot of social anxiety, but of course, it's not limited to that population alone. Then you have specific kinds of anxiety. So situational anxiety, like people that are scared of heights or people that are very concerned about public speaking, which is a very common one. People who are afraid of large bodies of water, such as oceans, and will not travel on a ship for that reason. Other common kinds of anxiety, driving on highways, that's fear of open spaces, also fear of specific kinds of substances, body fluids like blood. We've all heard the stories of people who faint when they come across the sight of blood. And then fear of animals, insects, spiders, mice, snakes are very common. And obviously, there are many, many others. So, anxiety is pervasive in our culture today. And when you think about the world that we live in, it's not far fetched to see why anxiety levels have shot through the roof now. So let's list some of the issues in the world today. So there's after long periods of relative stability and peace, there's been a rise in armed conflict in many regions around the world. So whether you have a connection to those areas or not, the awareness that there's conflict around the world is tremendously unsettling for a lot of people. Connected to that, but not necessarily limited to that connection, is the economy. Many, many people are experiencing extreme economic challenges right now. People are finding it hard to pay their bills, finding hard to balance the budget. And of course, the recent shock to the economy and rising gas prices and the knock on effect of increased energy prices on goods and services really has pushed many people into a difficult spot economically. In addition to that, there is a rise in tension, political tension in many parts of the world, including parts of the world that had not experienced this for a long time. You see it's really around the globe now. And then you also have the daily regular stressors that many people experience. In addition to that, we have some new concerns. So young people are rightly concerned about what's going to happen with climate change. There's no assurance of a safe, predictable future for young people nowadays. So they're concerned about getting a job. Many people have graduated with a lot of debt. Some people simply worry about being able to support themselves, rising house prices. So there are real reasons for anxiety today. Let's talk about how to recognize anxiety when it's present. These are some of the tools that clinicians use to recognize anxiety. One very common thing is worry. That's a common thread. You see this really with generalized anxiety. It's almost as if the person's mind is roving, looking to latch onto things to worry about. And that's not meant in a pejorative sense, it's meant in a descriptive sense. People with general anxiety worry about everything, and it's a continuous preoccupation mental state. It's continuously worrying about many things, whether it's any of the things you talked about, what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to their children, and so on. So that's common with general anxiety and other kinds of anxiety. Some of the common symptoms are tension, that is feeling unable to relax, and a feeling of tension in the muscles. Sometimes this provokes or a sense of having to move around or restlessness. The people that are anxious can be irritable, they can be on edge and snappy because they themselves are on edge. So that kind of comes out in their interactions with other people. So they may present as being short tempered. People with anxiety very often find it difficult to, they talk about being unable to turn up their minds. This is described oftentimes colloquially as racing thoughts. I have to mention that in clinical settings, racing thoughts really is more associated with mania or hypomania mood states. Or people who experience that not being able to slow their minds down, not able to turn off their thoughts is very common in anxiety. And then with that comes the inability to sit still or inability to focus. So people very often find it difficult to concentrate on their daily tasks, which is one of the reasons why they can't really function. So taking tests, cognitive tasks, writing, reading email, sending email, those things can be very much impaired. Alongside of all that comes a difficulty sleeping. People often would say that they just can't fall asleep or they feel tired because your entire physiological system is on hype, it's on alert. Very similar to what you'd experience in a fight or flight situation, except it's sustained over time. And that is very draining on the body's physical and cognitive energies. So anxiety is not a trivial thing. It can be very, very distressing to the person that's experiencing it. Let's talk very quickly about other kinds of anxiety that I mentioned earlier. So social anxiety, it's the feeling of being extremely uncomfortable, uneasy around people that a person doesn't know very well. And this leads people to avoid social settings or social contacts with that social anxiety. And then I talked about some of the other kinds of anxiety. It's important to recognize that anxiety also can be secondary. What I mean by that is it can be triggered by medical conditions. A good example would be elevated thyroid or sometimes the use of substances, common substances like alcohol or caffeine. Alcohol, typically withdrawal or excessive of caffeine, can trigger, or even prescription medications like inhaled beta agonists or steroids. These agents can trigger anxiety symptoms. And of course, people can have panic attacks. That is a flood of overwhelming anxiety that seems to come from nowhere, rises to a peak, and then goes away. And people often feel like they're having a heart attack. So, anxiety is common. How is anxiety treated? Like many other mental health conditions, anxiety is very treatable. This is the good news. Anxiety can be treated easily and be controlled with a set of tools. Usually, biological tools like medication, psychological tools like talk therapy, specific kinds of talk therapy, and then typically some degree of lifestyle modification. And we'll walk through each of those one by one. So, what are some of the biological tools for addressing anxiety? Medications, a wide range of medications. They're called antidepressants, but they have a broad range of activity. Usually, the ones that act on the body's serotonergic system, which can be blocked by certain medications. There are many of them. Anxiety can also be treated in the short term with powerful medications such as benzodiazepines, antihistamines, even beta blockers that are used to treat hypertension can reduce anxiety in the short term. What medications do is to basically reset the neurochemistry of the brain so that you then have an opportunity to deal with the cognitive distortions, that is the mental processes that typically accompany anxiety, and there are usually many. One of those, for example, is the tendency to catastrophize. What does that mean? It means that a person's mind immediately jumps to the worst possible outcome. So it could be a piece of news or simply a thought, and the person's mind immediately goes to the worst possible scenario. Now, that can be combated by specific kinds of therapy, most notably cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches a person to stand outside their own thoughts, think about what they're thinking about. So it actually helps you become aware of distortions in your own thinking, and then teaches the person, gives them tools to challenge those thoughts and replace them with more realistic or balanced thinking. So, a good example would be, let's take a social anxiety scenario, for example. A person gets an invitation to go to a party or school gathering or something, some social gathering, and they immediately think, oh no, I'm going to look awkward, I'm going to embarrass myself, they're going to hate me. That's an example of an automatic negative thought on end. And what does cognitive behavioral therapy do? First of all, it teaches you to identify, oh, that's a negative automatic thought. Then it teaches you to question the thought. What evidence do I have for that line of thinking? Well, none. I don't have any evidence for that. That's just my own mind making that up. That's just my own fear speaking. And then it teaches you to replace that thought with something more realistic. There probably are people there that may not like me, but there are a lot of people who may like me there. And I won't know if I don't try. And then teaches you to plan what to do, role play scenarios that allow you to prepare for this situation. That's an example in a nutshell of how CBT operates. But in addition to that, there are many techniques you can learn and just use at any point in time in the moment to help yourself deal with anxiety. So let's talk about those. This is really, I would say, the meat of today's discussion. There's several of them. The first of them is deep breathing, or what's nowadays called a box breathing. Box breathing. What is box breathing? Think about your screen right now, the image on your screen. It's like a rectangle. So box breathing follows that. It's breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Or breathe in for 3 seconds, hold it for 2 seconds, breathe out for 3 seconds, hold it for 2 seconds, and repeat it. It's very effective. It's taught to elite military operators and elite performers across all industries. So let's try this out together. So imagine you're in your favorite spot, by the fire, by the lake, by the ocean, sitting quietly in the sun in a park with no distractions, nothing around you. Close your eyes, put one hand on your belly, and gently feel your breath. Feel your stomach move with your breath. And as you do that, then close your eyes and then take a deep breath. And you take a deep breath for a count of 3, hold it for a count of 2, take a breathe out for a count of 3, and hold it for a count of 2, and then repeat. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, hold your breath, 1, 2, breathe out, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, hold your breath, 1, 2, breathe out, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath, 1, 2, breathe in again, 1, 2, 3, hold it, 1, 2, breathe out, 3, 2, 1, hold it, 1, 2. Box breathing is effective because what it does is it taps into our most basic biological systems, the parasympathetic system. Most people have heard of the fight or flight system. That's our sympathetic system. That's the part of us that gears us up for when we feel attacked or threatened. That's actually the part of us that gets triggered when we're anxious. And what happens with anxiety is that system is triggered on an ongoing basis for a long time, but our bodies were never meant to sustain that level of heightened awareness or activity. And so what box breathing does is it triggers the opposite system, the one that cools us down, calms us down, and allows us to function at rest. That's called our parasympathetic system. And by slowing down our breathing, it actually slows down our heart rate and helps us feel calmer. Box breathing is one of the single most effective techniques we have for combating anxiety of all kinds. What are some other techniques? Well, there's progressive muscle relaxation. which is a tool for bringing our minds back into our bodies, essentially. And I'll explain that. So when we're anxious, our minds are, we're sort of locked into our own heads, so to speak. We're thinking, playing out all sorts of scenarios in our minds, and we're really not present in the moment. What muscle relaxation does is it grounds us back in a physical awareness of our bodies, and so that brings us back into the present and takes us out of our heads in a good way, so to speak. So let me describe that. So you sit down in a chair with your feet flat on the ground and your hands relaxed, possibly on the arms of your chair or in your lap if there are no arms. And then you first of all start by feeling your basically your body in that situation. Then what do you do next? You clench your toes, you curl them under, clench them there for a few minutes, and then you curl them up and you point them up to the sky or to the roof. You curl them under again, and then you extend them and point them up to the sky. That actually works two sets of muscles, the ones in front of your leg and the ones in the sole of your feet. Then you move up to your calves and you clench them. You clench them and hold it for a count of two. Then you relax them. Clench them again, hold them for a count of two, and then you relax them. You go up to your thighs, you do the same. You go up to your belly muscles, you do the same. You go up to your pectorals, you do the same. Then you go up to your shoulder muscles, the deltoids, you do the same. You raise them up, you hold it for a count of two, then you put them down. Raise them up again for a count of two, and put them down. You do the same for your biceps, you do the same for your triceps. You clench your fists, one, two, you relax them. And then you go to your neck, you can turn the head to the side, turn it to the side, turn it up, put it down. What progressive muscle relaxation does, again, is to ground you in an awareness of your body, where you are right then in the moment. Now, what are some other tools, some powerful tools that we have for dealing with anxiety? Well, thought reframing is a powerful cognitive strategy. What does it mean to reframe? It basically means we can look at the situation half full or half empty. Let's look at a common scenario. I just got the news that my grades were a B or a C. I could look at it as, oh my God, this is a catastrophe. Now my GPA is going to tank and I'm never going to get to grad school. And then I won't have a good life. And then so on and so on and so on. You could look at it that way. Or you could look at it the other way, which is, wow, I got a C. While that's not really what I wanted, and that does mean I'll have to work harder in the future, maybe this gives me an opportunity to learn how to prepare better. So instead of freaking out, I'm going to take this opportunity to go sit down with my academic advisor and figure out what I could do better next time. So it goes from this chain of thoughts that leads to a terrible place, that's something I can control and I can have no impact on, to an opportunity to learn. That's reframing. Powerful, powerful tool. What are some other things? Now, some of these get into what you work on with the clinician. So gradual exposure. Gradual exposure is basically a cognitive strategy that makes a list of the things you fear. And you use this for specific phobias like heights or speaking or bridges or large bodies of water or animals. And basically you make a list of the things I don't want to see happen or you're afraid of, and then you expose yourself to them in a controlled way, slowly over time, from the least anxiety provoking to the most anxiety provoking. And what that does is it basically helps you conquer your fears. So these are some powerful techniques for dealing with anxiety. Let's go over them again. You can do deep box breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, cognitive reframing, and graded exposure. Anybody can learn to control anxiety, just takes the right tools. Stay tuned for the next episode.